guys, Evan Narcisse from Kotaku here again at PAX East 2014. We're about to take a look at a game called Darkest Dungeon, which is a dungeon crawler where the mechanics change based on the emotional state of your characters. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, basically. It's a turn-based dungeon crawler that focuses on kind of the stresses of being an adventurer as opposed to the glorification of it.
Right.
If that makes sense.
So you basically have to manage the emotions of the characters that you're controlling?
Yeah, so every character has like a health bar, obviously, but then they also have a stress meter, and everything that happens in the dungeon, rifling through corpses, getting punched in the face, seeing your buddy land a big hit, it all increases or decreases the amount of stress that the characters are under.
Right.
And at a certain point, when they hit this sort of crucial breaking point, they can either rise to the occasion and enter like a heroic overcharge,
right,
or they become afflicted with like a variety of like emotional conditions like abusiveness or masochism, depression,
right,
and they act outside of the player's control. So you kind of are assuming the role of like a hockey coach, where you can give direction, you can give feedback, you can decide who's on your starting lineup, but you can't tell someone how to act all the time.
Right, they can go off the rails if they get too pissed off.
Absolutely, just like game developers under deadline stress.
Right, so what was the inspiration for that mechanic? Like, what made you decide, hey, this is something I want to build into my game?
Game developers under deadline stress. Also, it's like we really loved old, CRPGs, like Eye of the Beholder 2 and, the early Ultima games. They didn't explain everything. They kind of they're a little uncompromising. So when we decided to do like a dungeon game, we wanted to approach it in a slightly different angle. We didn't want to try and keep pace with the big loot-driven games. We just thought shooting it through a different lens would be a more interesting take.
Awesome. All right, so let's take a look.
Our combat system reinforces the claustrophobic nature of some of these environments where each character's attack can only be launched from a certain rank and it can only hit a certain opposing rank. So that creates some interesting tactical choices. Party order is really crucial, and you're going to have enemies with abilities that juggle your order, and you can do the same to them. So for instance, there's a skeleton with a crossbow in the back right there. He's deadly in that position, but if Jeff over there can force him into a forward rank, he can't use his crossbow anymore, so it changes the landscape of the battle. You can also see that 3 out of the 4 party members are afflicted with a variety of psychological conditions, so you might want to watch for them to start acting out on their own. Sometimes they'll retreat, sometimes they'll miss a turn, sometimes they'll shout really depressing things that stress out their other friends. Each character is going to have about 8 different skills that you can train up, level them up, and learn them in town, and then select your loadout before you go in. So you can do multiple skill builds for each character class. We've got about 15 character classes, and the player's going to have a roster of about 20 heroes, so you can kind of slot in your A team, your B team. So now you can see the Vestal's in the front. He needs to retreat her so that he can get access to her heal again. She can only do that when she's in the relative safety of the back row. Shield Bash again knocks the Crusader back, so he's really not in an optimal situation at this point. The good news is the Plague Doctor is great in the back row, but the guy dodged. So you can see the Crusader barked a stress comment and then delivered a huge blow. Sometimes being afflicted is actually not that bad, but it's still outside of your control, so you never know what you're going to get. Death is permanent. The game saves all the time, so the minute you make a foolhardy choice or you push your team too far, you have to live with the consequences. That said, you can escape the dungeon back to town at any time, so you'll drop all your loot, and you might pick up a little cowardice trait on the way out, but you can preserve your investment in your characters. So she's paranoid. She thinks all her party members are out to get her. The Plague Doctor's got a lot of really great dots, though. So he's trying to reorganize his party a little bit in the middle of the fight. Stress-wise, Jeff is doing really, really poorly. So the Highwayman is an interesting class. It's kind of our take on the Rogue. He's equally effective at range or in melee, but he's very, very lightly armored. He's just got a long coat on, and but the advantage is that his position gets a little bit less relevant because he's able to sort of attack from a variety of different areas. So style-wise, we're aiming for like a real comic booky board game kind of look. I started out really loving comics when I was a kid, and then I got into concept art and digital painting. So it's been really nice to sort of revisit those like first influences and bring them back into a game. Mike Mignola, Guy Davis, Victor Kalvachev. I grew up, just loving those guys, so it's kind of a nice way to pay homage, I hope. So I think he's actually masochistic. He wants to get hit.
The Crusader.
I'm sorry?
The Crusader.
Yeah.
And does that affect the other party members too? Like if he's masochistic? Yeah.
Exactly. You can get a guy who gets abusive. He'll start taking out his frustration on his party members. Even around the campsite, when you're trying to mitigate the damage, you can see them act out. Sometimes guys will get depressed and wander off on their own, come back a few turns later. So it's really a game about making the best of an imperfect situation. And we're hoping that people enjoy the challenge, but you need to expect you're going to lose some guys. There's going to be moments of agonizing frustration and moments of really great reversals.
Okay, Chris, so how far along are you guys on Darkest Dungeon?
Well, we're about 10 months in. Okay. We're hoping to do early access in mid to late October.
Okay.
And hopefully ship the game in January or, Q1 / give us a break. Early 2015.
2015. Okay, what platforms?
Windows, Mac, Linux, and we're talking to some other people as well.
Sure,
we're a small team. We want to focus on that.
You want to nail it down first.
Yeah, exactly.
And not get depressed.
Which is a challenge sometimes.
Awesome. Darkest Dungeon at PAX 2014. Thank you very much.
Ether 1 is a adventure game about dementia. Now, if you've never had a friend or family member struggle with dementia, it's really horrifying. They lose their own sense of self, they lose their memory, they deteriorate. It's very, very, very harsh and very emotionally draining.